There was a time when her prayers filled the room. Each night, before turning off the lamp, she would speak softly to heaven. Names of family, neighbors, even strangers found their way into her whispers. Her words were steady, full of rhythm, like a familiar song she'd always known. But as the years passed, the melody faded. Grief, loss, and long waiting drained her strength. The words came slower, quieter, until one night they didn't come at all. She folded her hands as she always did, but her lips didn't move. There was nothing left to say. The silence inside her was deeper than sorrow. It was emptiness. The lamp cast a faint glow across the Bible by her bedside, and she looked at it, wondering when prayer had become so heavy. She didn't stop believing in God. She just stopped believing that her small, trembling voice could still reach him. She hadn't turned away from God. She had simply grown too tired to chase his silence. Each attempt to pray felt like climbing a mountain with no strength left. Every word cost too much. It wasn't anger that filled her heart, only exhaustion. She believed he existed, believed he was good, but somewhere along the way, she stopped feeling seen. When people at church asked how she was doing, she smiled softly. "I'm all right," she'd say, but inside she was empty, the kind of empty that even faith doesn't know how to describe. Sometimes she would close her eyes and whisper, "Lord, you know my heart," hoping that would be enough. And perhaps it already was, because even when she didn't speak, he was still listening. The nights grew longer with each passing season. She would lie in bed, eyes open to the darkness, feeling the stillness settle around her like a heavy blanket. There were moments she thought of praying, the way she used to, but her throat closed before she could form the first word. "Lord." She tried once, but the rest never came. Her chest ached with quiet, her thoughts tangled and tired, and she wondered if heaven had forgotten the sound of her voice. The ticking of the clock became her only prayer, a steady, weary rhythm marking another night endured. It wasn't rebellion, it was surrender, not to despair, but to fatigue. And yet, even in that wordless surrender, Jesus was near, listening not to her lips, but to her heartbeat. Days turned into weeks. Her prayers remained silent. She began to wonder if heaven's door had closed for her. Maybe God had newer, younger voices to listen to, ones stronger, louder, more deserving. She didn't blame him. She only wished she could know if he still thought of her at all. One afternoon she sat by the window, watching rain streak down the glass. Her reflection looked tired, like someone who had lived too long in longing. "Do you still remember me, Lord?" she whispered finally. The words left her lips so softly that even she could barely hear them. There was no thunder, no voice, no sign. Only the sound of rain, steady and unbroken. But in the unseen, in the deep silence between drops, a presence stirred. The beginning of an answer that was already on its way. It still sat on her bedside table, the old leather-bound Bible. The edges were frayed, the pages soft from years of use. She used to read it every morning, tracing the verses with gentle fingers. Now, it gathered dust beneath the faint light of her lamp. Each time she reached for it, her chest tightened. She wanted to feel close to God again, but opening those pages only reminded her of the warmth she no longer felt. She would sit, staring at it, whispering, "I used to know you here." Then she would close her eyes, hoping to hear something, anything, but all she heard was the soft hum of the quiet. Still, she couldn't bring herself to move it. It stayed by her side like a memory, a silent witness to the faith that once overflowed. And though she didn't realize it, the same God whose voice she missed so deeply was already closer than her next breath, waiting not for her words, but for her heart. One night, after another long day of silence, she sat on the edge of her bed and closed her eyes. No strength left to speak, no courage left to try. A single sigh escaped her, long, trembling, heavy with years of longing. And in that moment, something unseen happened. The sigh rose like incense, carrying everything she could not say, every fear, every memory, every unanswered why. Heaven heard it, because in the kingdom of God, even a sigh counts as a prayer. For the one who listens does not need perfect words, only a heart that still beats toward him. That night, as she drifted into uneasy sleep, she didn't know her sigh had already reached the throne of grace, and someone was already praying in her place. The night was still, her breathing shallow, her hands resting over her chest. In the unseen realm, a light entered the room, soft, golden, tender. He came quietly, the way he always does when pain runs deep. Jesus sat beside her bed, looking at the woman who had once spoken to him so freely. He listened, not to her voice, but to the rhythm of her heart. Every silence, every ache, every longing. He understood it all, for he had once knelt in his own silence, in Gethsemane's shadow, when even heaven seemed far away. He knew what it meant to pray with no words left, so he stayed there with her, the Savior who does not leave when we fall silent. And as her breathing slowed, he whispered to the Father, "These are her prayers, let mine speak for hers." And heaven received them as one. That night was different, though she did not know it. Her sleep was deep, the kind that comes only when the soul finally surrenders. And while her mind rested, heaven worked. At her bedside, the one who loved her most prayed softly, not asking for her strength to return, but giving her his. He prayed for her heart to remember peace, for her mind to find rest, for her spirit to rise again when morning came. His words were not loud. They were woven in light, spoken in the language only love can understand. And as he prayed, her weary soul began to mend. The heaviness loosened, the silence softened, and something sacred moved through her, an unseen healing, a holy filling. Before dawn broke, he touched her hand gently and whispered, "I've kept every prayer you couldn't pray." Then he was gone, but his peace stayed. The morning sun slid through the curtains, soft and golden. She opened her eyes slowly, expecting the same weight that had greeted her for months, but something was different. The heaviness wasn't there. The silence, though still present, no longer hurt. It felt gentle. She sat up carefully, her joints aching as usual, yet her heart felt strangely light. It was as if someone had been there in the night, someone who had cleaned the air around her soul. She couldn't explain it. She hadn't prayed. She hadn't done anything to deserve it. And yet, there it was. Peace. Real. Steady. Quiet. She whispered without thinking, "Thank you." And though she didn't hear it aloud, something deep within her heart answered, "I was here." For days, that peace remained. It wasn't dramatic, but it was alive, a quiet undercurrent that carried her through her mornings. One afternoon, she sat in her chair by the window, watching the sunlight play across the floor. Her Bible lay open in her lap. She wasn't reading, just resting, her eyes half closed, her heart quietly awake. Then, like a breath that wasn't hers, a thought came, clear, tender, certain. "I never stopped hearing you." Her eyes filled instantly. It wasn't a sound from outside. It was deeper, a voice that spoke from within, from the same place where she had once thought God was absent. She pressed her hand against her chest and whispered, "Was that you, Lord?" No thunder followed. No light appeared. Only peace, the kind that confirms what words cannot prove. And she smiled, because she knew. He had been listening all along. Prayer returned not as a flood, but as a trickle, a few words at a time, like water finding its way back through dry earth. At first it was just, "Thank you," then, "Stay with me," then, "Help me love again." Her prayers became simple, unpolished, and deeply real. She stopped worrying about saying the right things. She spoke the way a child speaks to someone who loves them, without fear, without performance. Sometimes she just sat quietly, whispering his name. That alone was enough. And the strange thing was, the less she tried to make her prayers perfect, the more she felt him near. It was as though he had been waiting not for her strength, but for her surrender. Her evenings changed. The old pattern of struggle was gone. She no longer forced herself to pray before sleep. She wanted to. Her words were soft, sometimes only whispers, but they came easily now. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for peace. Thank you for not needing my words." She spoke to him as though he were sitting beside her, and in truth he was. The room felt different, warm, almost luminous. Sometimes she would close her eyes and feel it, that nearness, that breath of love surrounding her. Prayer had stopped being an effort. It had become presence. And in that presence her heart, once silent and dry, was alive again, not through her voice, but through his. Her evenings changed. The old pattern of struggle was gone. She no longer forced herself to pray before sleep. She wanted to. Her words were soft, sometimes only whispers, but they came easily now. Thank you for staying. Thank you for peace. Thank you for not needing my words. She spoke to him as though he were sitting beside her, and in truth he was. The room felt different, warm, almost luminous. Sometimes she would close her eyes and feel it, that nearness, that breath of love surrounding her. Prayer had stopped being an effort. It had become presence, and in that presence her heart, once silent and dry, was alive again. Not through her voice, but through his. It was late, the moon high and cold beyond her window. She sat in bed with her hands clasped loosely in her lap, the old Bible open beside her. The verse before her eyes read, "The Spirit himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words." Her throat tightened, tears welled, because she suddenly realized that was her story. All those nights of silence, all the times she thought she had failed to pray, he had been praying for her. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Thank you for praying when I couldn't." The moment hung in the air, sweet, holy and still. She felt no thunderous answer, no miracle in the room, only love, the kind that fills every broken space. For the first time in years, she felt forgiven not for sins, but for silence. And that night, she slept without fear, her heart at rest in the prayer he had finished for her. In the days that followed, her heart settled into a rhythm of quiet gratitude. There were no grand revelations, no heavenly signs, only peace. And that was enough. Every morning felt softer, every evening gentler. Even pain, which had once brought despair, now brought prayer. She had come to trust something profound, that God didn't wait for perfect words. He waited for honesty. Her prayers were now small, simple, pure. Sometimes they were nothing more than a sigh of thank you. But in those sighs lived an entire story, a journey from silence to intimacy. And she knew, with quiet certainty, that he understood her better than she understood herself. That was peace, not the absence of struggle, but the presence of someone who never left. It started one afternoon as she sat watching children play in the street. Their laughter rose like music, and she smiled softly, whispering, "Bless them, Lord, keep them safe." It was the first time she had prayed for someone else in years. And once she began, she didn't stop. She prayed for her neighbors, for the lonely widows she knew by name, for the young mothers who walked by her window each morning. She even prayed for strangers she saw in the grocery line, a tired face, a worried frown, each one a quiet invitation to her soul. Her heart, once too tired to pray for herself, had become a vessel of prayer for others. It was as if the love she had received was now overflowing, spilling into the world through her gentle petitions. She no longer prayed from emptiness, she prayed from abundance, because when Jesus fills the silence, it never stays inside us. It always flows outward. It started one afternoon as she sat watching children play in the street. Their laughter rose like music, and she smiled softly, whispering, "Bless them, Lord, keep them safe." It was the first time she had prayed for someone else in years, and once she began, she didn't stop. She prayed for her neighbors, for the lonely widows she knew by name, for the young mothers who walked by her window each morning. She even prayed for strangers she saw in the grocery line. A tired face, a worried frown, each one a quiet invitation to her soul. Her heart, once too tired to pray for herself, had become a vessel of prayer for others. It was as if the love she had received was now overflowing, spilling into the world through her gentle petitions. She no longer prayed from emptiness. She prayed from abundance. Because when Jesus fills the silence, it never stays inside us. It always flows outward. The days grew slower, but they were filled with a quiet rhythm, not of effort, but of grace. She no longer separated prayer from life. Everything had become worship. The kettle's whistle, the broom brushing the floor, the creak of her chair. Each sound was now part of her communion with God. Even when her body ached, she would whisper, "Still with me, Lord." And always the answer came in peace, in stillness, in the gentle pulse of his nearness. There was no more striving to reach heaven. Heaven had come down to her. Her breath itself had become prayer, not a desperate plea anymore, but a steady conversation between her soul and the one who loved it most. And she realized the greatest miracle was not that Jesus answered her once, but that he never stopped. When she opened her eyes again, she was no longer frail. Her breath was light, her body strong, her heart overflowing. Before her stood the one she had long spoken to in the dark, the one who had listened to every silence, every sigh. His eyes met hers, and all the years of distance, of doubt, of struggle, melted away in a single glance. He smiled and said, "I finished the prayers you began." Tears, now made of light, filled her eyes. There was no need to speak. Every unanswered cry had found its answer in his presence, and the woman who once thought she could not pray was now living in eternal communion, every moment, every breath, forever a hymn of peace. In heaven, there is no more distance, no waiting, no effort to find words. But if one could listen closely, they might still hear a faint melody, a song born from silence, a prayer made eternal. It is her voice, the one that once trembled, the one that once fell quiet, now joined with countless others, woven into the harmony of endless worship. Her story became a truth, whispered through the ages, that even when faith feels too tired to speak, love never stops listening. Her silence, sanctified by his compassion, now shines as testimony in eternity that Jesus prays for those who cannot and turns every unspoken sorrow into a hymn of grace.